You're watching the most exciting game you will ever see on your TV set. Telstar by Coleco with 3 different games. Telstar Tennis with digital scoring, variable speeds. Telstar Hockey. Each player controls a goalie plus a forward on the other side. Oops, a goal. And Telstar Singles Handball, a game you play yourself.
The first generation of home video game consoles consisted of 887 different consoles known to have been released between 1972 and 1984. Popular consoles of this generation include the Odyssey series, Atari Home Pong, and the Coleco Telstar series. Most games that were made in this generation had been hardwired into the console, unlike later generations. These consoles often came with accessories or cartridges that could alter the way that the game was played. In 1972, Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney founded Atari, which would go on to market the game Pong and become one of the most well-known video game companies of all time. Pong was the first commercially successful video game, and helped establish the video game industry along with the Magnavox Odyssey. While the Odyssey was highly limited compared to future consoles, it introduced features that became standards in the industry, including removable cartridges and multiple detachable controllers for 2 players.
The game cards activate lights on your television screen that bounce, float, or extinguish on contact, depending upon the particular game you've chosen to play. For example, to play Odyssey Tennis, you insert game card number 3 into the master unit. This activates 3 lights, 2 representing the players and 1 representing the ball. Press the special tennis game overlay into position on the television screen, and you're ready to begin an exciting, fast-paced tennis game.
Attention shoppers, the new Atari cartridge game is in.
Excuse me.
Uh-oh, George again.
Ooh, Atari's ASC battle.
It comes with 27 games, but that's just for starters. You can get 9 cartridges, 187 games.
Blackjack. Oh!
I'd like an Atari.
The second generation of video game consoles only had 19 systems, which is a lot less compared to the first generation with 887. This is because a lot of companies that were not successful did not go on to make any more consoles after the first generation. Popular consoles of this generation include the Fairchild Channel F, the Atari 2600, the Intellivision, the Odyssey 2, and the ColecoVision. This era peaked in popularity for arcade video games, which resulted in many arcade games to move to home consoles. The first being Space Invaders, which was released in 1980 for the Atari 2600, and then Donkey Kong, which Coleco packaged and released in August 1980. Built-in games saw limited use during this era. More advanced cartridges, which contained the entire game, were developed for the Fairchild Channel F, and most video game systems soon adopted similar technology. The popularity of game cartridges grew after the release of the Atari 2600. Most systems used cartridges until the technology was replaced by optical discs in 1990. In 1979, Activision was created by former Atari programmers and was the first third-party developer of video games. By 1982, the shelves in toy stores were overflowing with consoles, overhyped game releases, and low-quality games from third-party developers. An oversaturation of console games, coupled with poor knowledge of the market, saw the video game industry crash in 1983 and marked the start of the next generation. The crash caused major disruption to the North American market. Some developers collapsed and almost no new games were released in 1984. The second generation ended on January 1st, 1992 with the discontinuation of the Atari 2600.
Will you be the one to witness the birth of the incredible Nintendo Entertainment System? The first to play with Rob, the extraordinary video robot. Batteries not included. He follows the commands you put on the screen, so you get to the dynamite before it explodes. Will you be the one to raise the incredibly accurate zapper and play games like Duck Hunt?
The third generation of consoles began on July 15, 1983, with the release of the Nintendo Family Computer and the Sega Sys SG-1000. When the Nintendo Family Computer was released outside of Japan, it was remodeled and marketed as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES. This generation ended the North American video game crash, and home console manufacturers shifted from United States to Japan. Improvements in technology gave consoles of this generation improved graphical and sound capabilities. A big improvement of this generation was the ability for users to save their progress in a game, with Nintendo's The Legend of Zelda introducing the technology to the market. This allowed much more expansive worlds and in-depth storytelling, since users could now save their progress rather than having to start over. The best-selling console of this generation was the Nintendo Entertainment System, which was discontinued in 2003, marking the end of the third generation.
The Sega Genesis has blast processing. Super Nintendo doesn't. So what's blast processing do?
The fourth generation of video game consoles began on October 30th, 1987 with the Japanese release of the NEC Home Electronics PC engine. Although NEC released the first console of this era, sales were mostly dominated by the rivalry between Nintendo and Sega's consoles, the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. Nintendo was able to capitalize on its success in the previous generation and managed to win the largest worldwide market share of the fourth generation. However, Sega was extremely successful as well and began a new franchise, Sonic the Hedgehog, which was created to compete with Nintendo's Super Mario series. Several other companies released consoles in this generation, but none could compete with Nintendo and Sega. This generation ended with the emergence of the new 5th gen consoles.
Hello, citizens of Europe. As spokesperson for SAPS, the Society Against PlayStation, I'd like to talk to you about a menace threatening humanity. It's happening right here, in our very homes, and corrupting the lives of our loved ones. Yes, friends, I'm talking about this. It may look like a harmless bagel toaster, but inside is a deadly donut. How do you know PlayStation is not a normal game system? It carries these telltale signs. Scientists say its effects are mind-boggling. Users lose all sense of reality and enter another world.
The 5th generation of consoles began on October 4th, 1993. For home consoles, the best-selling console was the Sony PlayStation, followed by the Nintendo 64, and then the Sega Saturn. This era is known for its pivotal role in the video game industry's leap from 2D to 3D graphics, as well as the shift from home console games being stored on cartridges to optical discs. The 5th generation officially ended with the discontinuation of the PlayStation on March 23, 2006.
This is the Xbox, and so for the first time, let me now unveil Xbox.
The 6th generation of video game consoles began on November 27, 1998. Platforms in the 6th generation include consoles from 4 companies: the Sega Dreamcast, Sony PlayStation 2, Nintendo GameCube, and Microsoft Xbox. The major innovation of this generation was a full utilization of the internet to allow a fully online gaming experience. Services such as Microsoft's Xbox Live became industry standards in this and future generations. This caused many improvements, such as the ability to download games directly from the internet rather than to purchase physical media such as a disc or cartridge.
Conditions in anticipation of tomorrow's PlayStation 3 launch. It marks a new era in gaming with lifelike graphics and motion sensing controls. Teacher Shirley Engel is live outside Best Buy in Burlington tonight with some die-hard gamers. Good evening, Shirley.
Good evening, Nick. Well, the lights are out and the doors are closed at this location, but just check out this lineup of customers just waiting for the crack of dawn. That's when 21 PS3 consoles will hit store shelves, and despite the weather, they say it's worth the overnight wait.
The 7th generation of home consoles began on November 22, 2005 with the release of Microsoft's Xbox 360 home console. This was soon followed by the release of Sony's PlayStation 3 on November 17, 2006, and Nintendo's Wii on November 19, 2006 the following year. Each new console introduced new technologies. The Xbox 360 offered games rendered natively at high-definition video resolutions. The PlayStation 3 offered HD movie playback via a built-in 3D Blu-ray disc player, and the Wii focused on integrating controllers with movement sensors as well as joysticks. Some Wii controllers could be moved about to control in-game actions, which would enable players to simulate real-world actions through movement during gameplay. Joining Nintendo in releasing motion devices and software, Sony released the PlayStation Move in September 2010, which featured motion sensing gaming similar to that of the Wii. In November 2010, Microsoft released Kinect for users with the Xbox 360. Kinect did not use controllers, instead using cameras to capture the player's body motion and using that to direct gameplay, effectively making the player act as the controller. Having sold 8 million units in its first 60 days on the market, Kinect claimed the Guinness World Record of being the fastest-selling consumer electronics device. The 7th generation slowly began to wind down when Nintendo began cutting back on Wii production in the early 2010s. The 8th generation of consoles includes consoles released since 2012 by Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony. For home video game consoles, the 8th generation began on November 18, 2012, with the release of the Wii U, and continued with the release of PlayStation 4 on November 15, 2013, and the Xbox One on November 22, 2013. The Wii U was the first home console of this generation to be discontinued on January 31, 2017, to make way for Nintendo's second home console competitor, the Nintendo Switch, which was released on March 3, 2017. Throughout the generation, Sony and Microsoft continued to release hardware upgrades to their flagship consoles. In August 2016 and September 2016, Microsoft and Sony respectively both released slim versions of their consoles, the Xbox One S and the PlayStation 4 Slim. Following this was an upgraded version of the PlayStation 4, the PlayStation 4 Pro, which was released later in November 2016. Meanwhile, Microsoft also announced an upgraded version of the Xbox One in 2016 under the name Project Scorpio. This would become the Xbox One X, released a year later in November 2017. Both of these consoles were aimed at providing upgraded hardware to support rendering games at up to 4K resolution. Nintendo's new console, known as NX, would later be released in March 2017 as the Nintendo Switch. Being a hybrid between a handheld and standalone console, it is a tablet-sized unit with a built-in display that has detachable wireless controllers and can be placed in a docking station for use with a television. The Switch was highly successful in its first year of sales, especially in comparison to its predecessor, the Wii U. In its first year, the Switch sold 3.2 million units in Japan, breaking the yearly record set by the PlayStation 2, and it had already completely outsold the Wii U by January 2018. Based on 4.8 million units sold in the United States by the end of 2017, Nintendo officially declared that the Switch had outpaced the 7th generation Wii as the fastest-selling home video game console of all time in the United States. The next generation of home consoles is just a few months away, with Sony's PlayStation 5 and Microsoft's Xbox Series X expected to launch in the fall of 2020. With the incredible advancements of home game consoles over the years, new technology and processing power, Generation 9 will be the most exciting yet. Thanks for watching.